I'm going to turn things over now to CBS 4's Jim DeFede, because, Jim, we have a lot of questions, and I know you've been on the phone with your sources all day long. Earlier this afternoon, you were able to bring us some very interesting insight because you spoke to the attorney for the building, for the Champlain Towers. What information were you able to glean from that attorney this evening?
Yeah, we talked to Ken Director, who is the attorney for the building. One of the questions that has come up revolves around the notion that this building was due for a 40-year recertification. The building was constructed in 1981, and under Miami-Dade code, every 40 years a building needs to go through an intense review. This building was going through that process, we have now learned. And this isn't just something that occurs over the course of a day. This is a process that takes weeks and months even. So as it was explained to me by the attorney for the building, is that the building had gone through an initial round of inspections, and that certain repairs that were needed for the building were identified. And the building was in the process of hiring contractors to fix those issues that were raised in the inspections. Now, I asked the attorney for the building if any of the problems that were identified in the inspections could have caused the type of cataclysmic result that we saw today, where the building collapsing. He said he did not think so. But then he added something really interesting. He said that some of the building's representatives were on site after the collapse, and they were in the garage area reviewing it for themselves along with Miami Fire Department and others. And he said, he described, and I just want to read his exact words, a hole opening up under the garage. So you have the structure, you have a pool, you have a garage, and he's saying that underneath that garage, when the building collapsed, it exposed a chasm under there, a hole that opened up. Now, this is very interesting for a number of reasons. Again, if a building is going to collapse the way you saw it collapse in this case, you tend to not look for issues that were going on with regard to the roof. It's unlikely that the repairs that were taking place on the roof would have caused this collapse. But if there was something more to the structure underneath the building, the pylons that were holding the building up, if those were exposed, if those had been somehow betrayed over time, and that had been now identified, that could get us a long way to understanding how this building collapsed. Why was there a hole? Was it sea level rise? Was it saltwater intrusion? Those are all things that are being looked at. I know there's been some speculation about a sinkhole. More than likely, you're probably looking at issues more closely related to the seawater coming in. It's not far from the beach. It's right on the beach, rather. It's not far from the ocean. And there's a lot that goes on underneath these buildings that could bring them down. So that's what we're learning right now. But that's very interesting. And I will add one other thing. USA Today, the New York Times, others are reporting, and I've read some of the studies. There was an FIU professor who recently came out and said that they did a study from in the late 1990s, and said that this stretch of Miami Beach, and this building in particular, was sinking at a rate of about 2 millimeters a year. Now, the professor said that that is not in and of itself cause for the building to collapse, but it's just another factor. When you start adding these things together, when you look at the fact that the building was settling in a way that was alarming to this professor, this hole that opened up underneath the building, I think we're beginning to start seeing the early stages of where this investigation might go. But the answers we're not going to learn for weeks, if not months from now, before we get a final conclusion. It took almost a year to understand what happened with the FIU bridge collapse, and this is far more involved.
Jim, when you talk to the attorney about the recertification process that takes place every 40 years for these buildings, did he give you an idea of whether or not there had been past problems with this tower?
So, again, he said that there were inspections that were done as part of the routine inspection process. We're trying to get access to those records now. Those records will eventually become available to us. This recertification process is much more intensive. It's not just a walk around the building and look for different things. This is a full engineering review of the building, and there were problems that were identified. Again, the attorney says he does not believe the problems problems that were identified would have led to this collapse, but the timing is certainly curious, and that they were in the process of hiring contractors and engineers to come in and fix some of those issues. Well, you know, that's where we were at right at this point. But before those contractors could get on the site, this building came down.
Jim DeFede, as always, thank you so much for your insight. I know there are a lot of people with a lot of questions tonight. We just heard from Joan Murray's story over at the Family Reunification Center that people were a bit frustrated with the lack of visuals on the ongoing search, but now it appears as though a lot of the search was going on in the building portion that's still standing, as well as underneath that building. And now we know why, because as Jim DeFede mentioned, a large hole has presented itself underneath the garage of that building, the Champlain Towers in Surfside.